Deep inside the unforgiving, jagged mountain ranges of the Middle East, the dictatorial regime in Tehran believed they had successfully constructed the ultimate untouchable sanctuary. For decades, they funneled billions of dollars into carving out a sprawling subterranean labyrinth of reinforced concrete and hardened steel. This was their crown jewel, a massive network of deeply buried missile cities and nuclear bunkers that were theoretically immune to any conventional military strike on the planet. They thought they had achieved perfect invulnerability, but they were dead wrong. In a matter of seconds, invisible apex predators gliding silently through the stratosphere tore through that impenetrable mountain armor as if it were nothing more than wet paper. The absolute tip of the American military spear in this historic, devastating assault was the legendary B-2 Spirit stealth bomber. Designed specifically to hunt down and completely vaporize high-value, deeply buried targets without ever triggering enemy radar, the B-2 completely circumvented Iran's multi-billion-dollar air defense network. The stealth bombers slipped into Iranian airspace entirely undetected, casting a terrifying shadow over the battlefield. They immediately set their sights on the most heavily guarded geographic coordinates on the map. We are talking about the deeply buried nuclear enrichment facilities and massive ballistic missile hubs located in Fordo, Natanz, and Isfahan. To crack these subterranean fortresses, the United States Air Force unleashed the absolute apex of bunker-busting technology. They deployed the terrifying GBU-57 massive ordnance penetrator, weighing in at an absolutely staggering 30,000 pounds. This colossal munition is engineered to physically punch through 60 meters of solid mountain rock and reinforced concrete before violently detonating. When these massive bombs separated from the bomb bays of the B-2 Spirits and impacted the Earth, the sheer kinetic force shattered the subterranean structures, simulating a localized, devastating earthquake. The thick, heavily fortified protective shields guarding the Fordo enrichment facility sustained catastrophic damage in the face of this unimaginable penetrating power. But the United States military was not satisfied with simply cracking the roofs of these mountain bunkers. They wanted to permanently seal the exits. To execute this secondary phase of the operation, the Pentagon called in the heavy cavalry. Global military observers closely watching the RAF Fairford Air Base in the United Kingdom noticed a massive, highly lethal shift in American tactics. The B-1B Lancer heavy bombers, affectionately known by military pilots as the Bone, were being actively stripped of their standard cruise missile loadouts. In their place, ground crews were aggressively loading the aircraft with massive 2,000-pound joint direct attack munitions. This specific tactical shift completely transformed the supersonic bombers into ruthless precision demolition machines. With an incredible weapons payload capacity of 34 tons and the unique ability to hit supersonic speeds, the B-1B Lancers surged into the combat theater to finish exactly what the stealth bombers had started. The bombers mercilessly pounded hardened ballistic missile facilities hidden across the capital city of Tehran, Semnan, and Khuzestan. They utilized their precision-guided JDAMs to deliberately and violently collapse the massive entrance gates of the underground complexes. With absolute millimeter precision, they targeted the vital support structures, effectively dropping millions of tons of heavy mountain rock directly onto the tunnel exits and crushing the access points. How did the United States manage to dismantle these supposedly invincible multi-billion-dollar subterranean cities so easily? The answer lies in a fatal, catastrophic engineering flaw that the Iranian regime completely failed to account for in the era of modern hyper-advanced warfare. While the main labyrinth of the facilities sat hundreds of meters below the earth, protected by incredibly complex, zigzagging tunnels constructed with specific 50-meter offsets designed to miraculously dampen explosive shockwaves, the complexes fundamentally relied on surface-level infrastructure to survive. The regime had even engineered triangular-shaped blast doors specifically designed to evade aerial detection, hiding them in the darkest shadows of the mountain valleys. But a mountain bunker is totally useless without massive ventilation, shafts bringing in breathable air from the surface, and is entirely worthless without giant entrance ramps, allowing the ballistic missile transport trucks to actually exit the facility and fire. Armed with an overwhelming intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance umbrella, the United States military easily mapped out every single one of these critical surface vulnerabilities. High-resolution orbital satellites and invisible unmanned aerial vehicles gliding high above the battlefield instantly pinpointed the ventilation systems and concealed tunnel doors. The exact moment a heavy blast door opened to allow a mobile missile launcher to roll out into the open, a loitering American aircraft instantly dropped a precision munition directly onto its head. But even worse for the elite IRGC forces trapped inside, the relentless American bombardment completely vaporized the life support ventilation systems. By violently severing the flow of oxygen and physically collapsing the entrance ramps, the United States turned these billion-dollar fortresses into massive subterranean tombs. Thousands of highly trained soldiers were stranded in the pitch black alongside their useless, highly explosive inventory. The sheer scale and blistering speed of this systematic destruction are difficult to even comprehend. In a span of just 72 hours, the American military successfully struck an unbelievable 1,700 strategic targets, with exactly half of those targets consisting directly of these underground military facilities. The statistical data pulled from the battlefield confirms that the Iranian war machine is suffering a total systemic collapse. Between February 28th and March 13th, the heavily battered Iranian military could only manage to launch 585 missiles. While that number might sound significant to a civilian, it represents an absolute freefall for a regime that possessed thousands of pre-positioned weapons and was initially launching over 350 heavy munitions every single day. Their strategic launch capacity has plummeted by an estimated 80 to 90%. The most terrifying aspect of this underground destruction campaign revolves around Iran's highly controversial nuclear program. Hidden deep beneath the mountain at the Fordo enrichment facility were over 1,000 centrifuges and stockpiles of highly dangerous enriched uranium. By unleashing the 30,000-pound deep penetrating munitions and aggressively sealing the access tunnels, the United States has heavily disrupted the regime's ability to weaponize that radioactive material. Ground reports from international defense analysts, including the Hudson Institute, suggest that the massive explosions have severely damaged the internal storage systems, leaving the regime with restricted, nearly impossible access to their own nuclear stockpiles. This absolute catastrophe for the Iranian military extends far beyond the physical borders of their own country. For decades, the dictatorial regime in Tehran has utilized these massive subterranean hubs as the central nervous system for their sprawling international axis of resistance. These hidden mountain cities were the primary command, control, and logistical supply centers for proxy armies, stretching from the Houthi rebels in Yemen all the way to Hezbollah operatives in Lebanon. By permanently severing this vital logistical artery, the United States has essentially blinded and starved the entire proxy network. The highly coordinated proxy militias can no longer rely on massive secret shipments of advanced suicide drones and anti-ship ballistic missiles flowing out of Tehran. The global supply chain of terror has been violently cut. We are currently witnessing the absolute beginning of a geopolitical blind flight for the dictatorial regime. Their incredibly expensive, highly touted air defense networks proved to be totally useless against the American B-2 spirits. Their impenetrable mountain fortresses were violently transformed into concrete traps by supersonic B-1B Lancers. The United States and its European allies now operate with completely undisputed, terrifying dominance over the skies of the Middle East, treating the heavily contested airspace as if it were their own private training range. While the immediate threat of isolated ballistic missile launches still exists as the regime desperately attempts to empty whatever usable stockpiles remain, the overall strategic reality is undeniable. The massive billion-dollar doctrine of burying their military assets underground has completely failed in the face of modern American air power. This massive miscalculation has left the Iranian government politically isolated, economically shattered, and militarily broken. The Washington administration is systematically ensuring that when the dust finally settles on this historic conflict, the world will not be facing a highly dangerous nuclear-capable Iranian menace, but rather a completely neutralized rival permanently stripped of its ability to plunge the region into chaos.